Have you ever wondered if modern AI systems, so large language models, are humans or more creative? Well, a study was just released before Christmas in the journal Nature looked at this exact question. So it looked at something called divergent thinking. Now, in psychology, we can break creativity down to different types. You have convergent thinking and divergent thinking. Divergent means you're trying to start from a problem and come up with as many solutions as possible. So it's like open-ended thinking. Whereas convergence means you're trying to close in on one solution to the problem. Now, this study used something called a divergent association task, where you think of 10 nouns and they have to be as unrelated to each other as possible. The results were really interesting. They actually found at baseline that humans and large language models were very similar in terms of their divergent thinking ability, but there was much more diversity in the human sample. So obviously some humans did poorly, some humans did very well, whereas the large language model scores tended to cluster much closer together. Obviously from an evolution perspective, the genes for divergent thinking, because obviously it's polygenic, so lots of genes that actually relate to divergent thinking. At times during instability, these genes were favored, and then obviously during times of stability, the genes for more convergent thinking were probably favored. A few other things here. The LLMs tend to be anchored to specific words, so there was less diversity in the large language models in terms of the words they actually produced. And the large language models tended to produce more abstract words, which obviously would appear more in text because they're designed to predict the next word. Whereas the humans tended to produce more words that were grounded in the real world, like chair or car, which obviously is informed by psychomotor data or just the things they use on a daily basis. Now, a very interesting finding as well was the top 10% of humans tended to outperform the top 10% of AIs. So at the upper echelons of divergent thinking, humans are still much better than large language models. Now, I have to caveat here, they didn't use step-by-step reasoning like you'd see in the most modern AI systems. The large language models were using less common words as a heuristic to kind of game the test rather than having true semantic understanding like the humans would. We have to be careful here because this still amounts to a form of creativity, because they're still producing rare words, but they're not doing it in the same way that the humans are. When they actually prompt the large language models to behave like human geniuses from the past, so for instance, like Leonardo da Vinci or like Albert Einstein, this didn't actually help the large language model performance at all. The model just tended to produce words that were associated with the domain of that human expert, just kind of narrowed down the LLM to that domain, and it actually made the performance worse. We should be careful to use large language models as like the core of our creative output because they tend to produce more similar output because obviously they're trained on a similar training corpus and they're autoregressive, meaning they're just predicting the next word. So you don't get the same diversity that you might in humans, which is interesting. But again, we can't overstate these findings because even if they're not using the same creative process that a human would, it's still valuable creative output, and they're certainly very good for brainstorming and as a starting point.